First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for switching the language from German to English. Although I understand a little bit of German, I usually understand it better after a couple of beers, which is obviously not a good idea right now. So thank you for switching to English. At Bunq, for those of you who might know us, also for those of you who might not know us, we always put our users first. And we believe ourselves to be a true tech company, which allows us to have very strong engineering and very strong AI teams. And by applying these engineering and AI teams, we often are far ahead of the rest of the market, which allows us to develop tools that make life easy for our users. Now, one of the areas where we have deployed AI many, many years ago was anti-money laundering, because the state of affairs when we started was that anti-money laundering was mostly based on rule-based systems. And to us, back in 2015, this was incomprehensible because it was clear that AI could achieve much better results. Now, at the time, AI was not very well known in this sector, and so we started developing our own tools, and based on our own metrics, we can estimate that thanks to the use of AI, the accuracy of transaction monitoring is about 2.5 times better than compared to rule-based systems, which is obviously very good because it helps on both sides of the equation. On the one hand, you don't disturb true users that have nothing to do. You don't block their accounts or prevent valid transactions. On the other hand, you are far more effective in stopping bad actors. Now, I know today, especially after the wide adoption of ChatGPT, people are like, okay, AI is the future and AI is going to be great. But imagine about 8 years ago, the knowledge of AI was very limited. And so I'm very proud that we had both the proficiency and the technical knowledge to apply AI, as well as the determination to keep using AI, sometimes against the wills of others. So I think that's what I have to say now, and I look forward to questions and conversing further on this topic.
Okay, thanks a lot. Would you add your comments on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ali. And I think a lot of this is actually going to kind of overlap, which is actually good. So from a Feedzai standpoint, kind of Ali talks about that foresight. We kind of started maybe 12, 14 years ago. And again, our strong belief, I guess our working hypothesis is that AI and predominantly machine learning can be a huge force for good in preventing AML, financial crime, economic crime, the effects of financial crime on society as a whole. And I think when we started on that journey, it was about being present and trying to bring that topic to bear. To Ali's point about ChatGPT, but more broadly now, we're seeing actually adoption is accelerating, and a lot of people will say they use AI, machine learning in some way, shape or form. And I think actually from our perspective, we're almost moving into that next frontier now, which is how can it be used responsibly? How can it be used to bring the latest techniques? How can you do this in a way that brings trust and brings credibility? So for us, things like being able to visualize, being able to explain, being able to remove bias, or being able to explain bias when it's there deliberately are key. So kind of taking that story on for us right now, it's about how can we bring this into a way that democratizes it and makes it appealing, but brings certainty, trust, and credibility. My personal experience is I actually kind of worked in large banking organizations for about 20 years before I kind of moved into this as a product manager. I was a user of kind of these solutions, and the thing I love, if that's the right word, about financial crime is its confrontational nature. It's changing every day. The thing you do today, somebody's going to try and blow holes in that and blow it apart tomorrow. And I like that kind of give and take. But the reason that's relevant is it's very hard to put a rules-based system or a decision-based system in with any degree of certainty, because the minute it's out there, by definition, is probably the best performance. After that, the criminals will, by definition, try and get around that. And one of the appealing things about AI, machine learning, and where it's going as an industry and where we're trying to take it right now is trying to really kind of react to that confrontational nature. And the reason that I find that fascinating in AML is it kind of goes against the need for certainty and the need for explainability. And hopefully with AI and machine learning, we can bridge that gap between confrontation whilst bringing that kind of trust and certainty. And I think that's vital for the societal benefits and the credibility, both for the consumer and for organizations.
Thank you. I guess that from a political standpoint, the fighting of money laundering is a no-brainer. So if banks start to go into this area with artificial intelligence, I guess this is costly. So I would like to ask you, Ali, in the cost-benefit analysis, just for the bank, what is the purpose that you invest more money than other banks, I guess, for a political goal, which is worthwhile, but what is your incentive to do that, just from the cost-benefit analysis?
That's a great question. Well, for us, we are a little bit of a strange company because although we are a commercial company and obviously we look at cost-benefit, our most determining factor is the happiness of our users. And so we deploy the technologies in areas wherever we can, where it makes the biggest impact in a positive sense to our users. And so if you have a bunch of users that would otherwise be unsafe and you can keep them safe, obviously having that safety and having that trust is a big priority to us. And that's why we deploy AI, because we want to keep our users safe. Now, as the cost benefit, obviously our data engineering resources are the most expensive we have, together with our engineering department. But then again, our users' happiness and our users' safety is the most important asset we have as well. So in our maybe somewhat simplistic consideration, we are putting our most important resource in an area where our users appreciate it most.
Yeah, thank you. Andy, you mentioned that artificial intelligence is somewhere the future. And if you take the big artificial intelligence definition and take out of this the machine learning, which is a subgroup of this area, and even deeper, if you take deep learning, some neural network, which is even a smaller and more sophisticated way to do it. Going this way, what do you think, which method or which technology is most appropriate for the future? Where is it going? So what kind of models, in your view, should banks use to tackle this problem?
Yeah, I think probably the first thing to say is that I don't see the future as necessarily getting rid of what happens today. I think machine learning with things like decision trees do have a place, and they provide a high degree of certainty. But where we're seeing the technology go to and where we're kind of seeing the value can be realized is in things like, you say, deep and neural kind of based learning. So looking at pattern-based behavior and kind of looking at those links between entities and pieces of data. The other thing we're seeing huge value in right now is the combination of unsupervised learning. And the reason unsupervised is really appealing in AML is, by definition, if you've been able to label it, then you're able to identify it. You're trying to find things you weren't able to identify. So unsupervised learning definitely has its place in finding cases that weren't there before. The problem with that is then actually being able to explain those. And that's where something actually like graph-based learning, and that's where I talk about visualization. With graph-based learning, you can literally visualize the network and show the links.
Yep.
But not only actually can you show the link, you can show the depth of that link, how strong that link is, what the causal basis of that is, and what it's based on.
Yep.
And that's great, because that means you can then explain why that link may inform your next direction as a bank or a financial institute. So certainly neural kind of learning and deep neural is appealing, but combining with that graph-based visualization, I think for us is key.
Okay. Ali, could you give us some feeling how successful you are in finding money laundering? So what is the success rate in applying this methods, artificial intelligence, by finding factual money laundering?
Well, that's a very tough question to answer, because all we know is that it's based on, generic numbers, that it's more effective and more efficient. I think one of the issues we have with detecting anti-money laundering is that the feedback loop to the banks is not very good. So when we suspect something, we report it to the Financial Crime Division, FIU, it's called in the Netherlands. But we never get a feedback like, hey, you reported this entity, whether it's a person or a company, actually this was a false positive. Or, hey, you didn't report this person, this is a false negative. And because of the lack of this feedback loop, it is tremendously difficult to understand how well you're doing. And the reason, I believe, for this lack of the feedback loop is because the law was made many, many years ago in a world where things were rule-based. And in the world that we have today, where it's AI-based and statistics-based, you need to have that feedback loop, but it's not present. Yeah. So to answer your question truthfully, we know it's more effective. We know we catch a lot of cases, not just AML, but also different types of fraud. But we cannot know how much we miss because nobody ever tells us anything.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Andy, you mentioned that neural networks could provide some positive analysis in this matter. The disadvantage, there are, in my view, two disadvantages of neural networks. The first is you need a huge amount of data to make it possible that the machine learns something. And another problem I would maybe see is that you have experts in this area, so human experts who have some knowledge. So taking up the idea of Ali with a feedback loop, if you do not get a feedback loop from officials, from the police or somewhere, then maybe the feedback loop from experts, which somehow must include in the neural network. Is it possible? So what do you think about the implementation of expert knowledge in neural networks, and what is the data problem? Is there a data problem, or do you have enough data?
Generally, we tend to have enough data, especially if you're able to kind of apply that at a generic basis across multiple organizations. So remove all the data privacy issues, you still have a strong enough data set to create strong enough hypotheses and strong enough theories that can then be applied on a per organization basis. Ali's absolutely right, and I think you've alluded to it. The problem with AML maybe compared to fraud is you don't get those labels, you don't get that positive reinforcement. But I think one of the things we are able to do, or one of the things you're able to do generally with these types of techniques, is show that the characteristics of the network or the individual or the entity, you are able to show explicitly how much they overlap with those that have been confirmed and have been found to essentially be criminal entities. So you can provide that level of certainty, and therefore you are able to interpret it. You're absolutely right. One of the dangers actually is almost that just enough access to be dangerous, and actually the person, you're only as good as the person using the tools in the end. And I would say that adopting these in an open source environment or a fairly loose environment will have the risks associated with that. And that's, I don't want to kind of plug Feedzai naturally, but generally those people working on this are trying to add a number of areas around that, which essentially create safe access, controlled access. And that's where things like bias reporting, change reporting, visualization, I think can help tell you whether you're on the right path or not.
One question for Ali. I thought by thinking about your bank was that besides using artificial intelligence for the purpose of finding money laundering, there must be also an advantage for you as a bank to use these expensive methods to analyze your customers. So maybe customer behavior, certain things where you can optimize your business model or your products in some way. Do you also use this kind of methods for this purpose, or is it just for fighting money laundering?
Yes, for sure. So we use AI in a number of different areas. So, for example, we use AI to determine which screens or which processes can be improved because the drop-off rate isn't what it should be. So we do meta-analysis on the app and on the endpoints and on the code that's being called. We use AI to help customer support to answer questions that users may have. I don't have the exact statistics, but I believe something like 24% or so of all customer tickets is being handled automatically through AI. We use AI for the direct benefit of our users to label transactions so that they can do easy budgeting. One of the great advantages of Bunq is that it makes life easy in a number of areas, including budgeting. So when you're standing in a shop and you pay your groceries, our system detects that it is in fact groceries and it deducts it from your groceries budget. And if you're standing in a restaurant and you pay for, I don't know, dinner, it will deduct it from the restaurant budget. So for these things, amongst a number of bigger things, we're also using AI, not just AML.
Okay, thanks a lot. Andy, I thought about your last statement about that the data are there. And then I thought, well, the supervisory authorities have also many data. Is it transferable, the idea that not only on the individual level of the bank, using artificial intelligence, that the supervisor can learn from banks who are the first starter, that the supervisory can learn to use their data to also fight money laundering?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's definitely some transference. It's definitely not just drop and go, though. You're probably looking, if I was to categorize it, you're probably looking at about 60% transference, 40% unique. And, you know, one of the important things here is actually not everybody interprets regulations the same way. So that interpretation is vital in this. We don't have a regulation and an answer.
Yeah.
We have regulations, and then everyone has their individual interpretation of that. Okay. And that may change based on different products. That may change on different regions. That may just change over time based on how a portfolio is going. If you take a fast-growing bank like Bunq, for example, they may see significant acceleration in the number of customers they have, and that demographic may not be the same. So it is vital that it's adaptive to the environment, the appetite, and the interpretation of the regulations there as well. And the other thing as well is I think it's naive to think of AML existing almost in an isolated place now. We're seeing more and more that fraud to AML convergence, especially in the case of mules. It's no longer okay for an organization to be the recipient of funds, of fraudulent funds from other organizations. So again, the interpretation for how to address that is key. So if I was to broadly categorize, I'd say it's about 60-40. Yeah. But if somebody thinks they could kind of plug this in, supervise it, and just kind of get value, I don't think that's going to work. Yeah. But I think being vital, if you know the business outcomes you want to drive, then that can make a huge step forward. And I think one of the beauty of AI, machine learning now, is the ability to iterate quickly is present, whereas perhaps before in older systems that might have taken months, we're getting that down to weeks in terms of the ability to iterate a new version based on new interpretations, new data, or just changes overall.
Yeah, thank you. I just take a look whether we have questions from the audience online. And I ask you whether you have questions about this topic to raise your hands. Not yet. Not yet. We have no questions. If you think about that, many people, many of our participants, maybe are not very into this kind of statistics, I would say.
Sure.
Ali, if you would give a statement for our participants, how to, or some recommendations, how they tackle this problem and what they should do, maybe to start the whole process, or what they should think about, could you give us a few recommendations for our participants due to your experience?
I will try to do my best, although, I mean, obviously everybody's needs are different. I think two things. For regulators or regulated instances that are thinking like, okay, the world is changing, we need to adapt, how do we need to adapt? I think we're entering into a world where you cannot only use laws and rules and regulations to achieve your goals. So for example, when it comes to AML, I believe that supervisors on a European level should provide banks with data sets. Like, hey, here are 100 million transactions. You're allowed to have 1% false positive, 1% false negative. Good luck. I believe that's the only way to create clarity and to set standards for banks so that they know what and how to achieve. Because as Andy said, the rules and regulations are too unspecific and too broad for interpretation, so that banks that are willing and able to implement those rules sometimes still get in a debate with regulators because the perceptions are different, or the ideas are different, or the interpretations are different. So that's one. Secondly, for executives or product people or anyone else who might be still skeptical about AI and who haven't tried to use ChatGPT yet, just open an account. It's free. Start conversing with the thing. You can ask it really cool things like, hey, I want to go to, I don't know, Hamburg. What are the best 5 things to do there? And start speaking to it as if it's a human being rather than a machine, and be prepared to be mesmerized on the level of answers and the quality of answers that you will be getting.
Thank you. Your turn, if you have some recommendations.
I mean, I fully agree with everything Ali said, but I think probably if I was to go very broad on this, it would be never have something working in your risk strategy that you don't understand and that you can't explain. So make sure everything you're working on, whoever's working on it, however they're doing it, it's not okay to say the machine in the corner gave me an answer, therefore I'm doing something. Yep. So I make sure the explainability, the transparency and the traceability is there even as you move into these advanced techniques. I think that would be the key recommendation for me.
It was also a very good idea from Ali that one need some database also for research. So it's for a researcher, if you have databases for which you have to pay money, then we have problems. So we need free data to just experience and maybe also give some academic insights for the whole thing. Yes, if there are not any more questions from the audience, I would like to thank you both for your participation in this fire sale. Without fire, but we are sustainable, so we do not burn something, but the fireside chat. Maybe it's not not dark enough for fire or something. Thanks a lot, both of you, and
thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Yeah, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Okay.